Hello everyone, it's comprehension time once again, my grade 5 and 6ers. I hope that you are ready to read along and then answer some questions as we explore our reading comprehension lesson. Now, reading comprehension should not be anything strange to you, since you do it every day for every subject and every activity that you undertake. So in simple terms, reading comprehension is the act of understanding what you are reading or saying. It is an intentional, active, interactive process that occurs before, during, and after a person reads a particular piece of writing. Reading comprehension is the last component in the act of reading. There are two elements that make up the process of reading comprehension. Now let's see what those are. We have vocabulary knowledge and text comprehension. And if you remember our lesson on vocabulary building, we know that vocabulary building has to do with word knowledge. So when we say vocabulary knowledge, we are speaking about our knowledge of words. Now, in order to understand a text, we must be able to comprehend the vocabulary or the words used in the piece of writing. If the individual word does not make sense, then the overall story will not either. We can draw on our prior knowledge of vocabulary, but we also need to continually be taught new words. Now, text comprehension is much more complex and varied than vocabulary knowledge. We can use many different text comprehension strategies to develop our reading comprehension. So what exactly are these text comprehension strategies? Well, we have monitoring for understanding. We have answering and generating questions, which means that you do not only look at questions presented to you, but you yourself try to create questions and then answer it back for yourself. And then you check the text to see if your answer is on par. We have summarizing and being aware of and using a text structure to aid your comprehension. So sometimes too, when you are structuring your questions, you would want to use questions based on information from the first paragraph, second part, so that there is an order. It's not mixed up like the first question, the answer, you would find it in the last paragraph and all of that. You must have a well laid out structure so that you can understand the passage better. Now, to understand what you have read, we answer open-ended questions that mostly begins with what, where, who, why, and how. Now, if you remember, we would have done those types of questions in one of our reading lessons where we explore what exactly these questions are asking us, or what kind of information questions referring to what would ask us to provide, the where questions, the who, the why, and the how. Now today, we're going to go through again the passage of a famous West Indian cricketer. And we did read the passage before where we looked at building our vocabulary by studying unfamiliar words. But today, we're actually going to be answering questions based on the passage. Now remember, I said that questioning and answering questions can be done before, it can be done during, and it can be done after. So if you're to look at the title, a famous West Indian cricketer, now what do you think the passage may be about? What are some of the key words you can use there to actually help you to understand what the passage is about? So the word famous, and if we draw from our vocabulary building, we know famous means someone who is well known, someone who is popular. And so it means that we're talking about someone here who is popular. And then it says cricketer. So is this someone who works in a store? Is this someone who would teach at a school? No, it's someone who plays cricket professionally. So it's a famous person, all right, that plays cricket. So the story again, Monday, 18th May 1994, was the third day of the fifth cricket match between West Indies and England at the Antigua Recreational Ground. Trinidadian Brian Charles Lara and Shivnarine Chandrapal of Guyana were at the crease. Guess what? Lara, an exciting batsman, was about to become the holder of the highest individual score in Test cricket. Let's pause there. Now the question, which cricketer was about to become the holder of the highest individual score in Test cricket? Now, do you see that's a question there that can be formulated from the first paragraph. Who was that person? Now, it causes you to actually look for the information because you would realize that not one person was mentioned. We have names such as Brian Charles Lara and we have Shivnarine Chandrapal. But who was it that was about to become the holder of the highest individual score? Yes, it was Brian Charles Lara. If you read carefully, it says, guess what? Lara, an exciting batsman, was about to become the holder of the highest individual score in Test cricket. So the information is there. You just have to read back the passage and try to find the information. Let's continue. The atmosphere on the ground was electrifying. Eyes were glued to televisions, ears stuck to radios. The world, including Sir Garfield Sobers, stood still. Everyone was suffering from Tara fever. Whoopee! Then it happened. At 11:46 hours, Chris Lewis bowled a short ball and Brian Lara hooked it to the backward square leg boundary. Oh yes, he had done it. Lara had surpassed Sobers' 365 runs with that boundary. The world went wild. There was singing, dancing, and converting everywhere. Now here again, there is another question. Whose score did Lara surpass? Now, what does it mean when we say surpassed? Again, from what we know in terms of our vocabulary, we know that surpass means that he went beyond what someone else had done. So he surpassed the score of Sir Garfield Sobers. Well, the answer is right there again. People were shouting accolades on this young cricketer in the cricket ground. When he was finally dismissed, he had scored 375 runs. At age 24, Lara was the greatest batsman on earth. He became the 12th batsman to score a triple century in a test match. Great, he's a living legend. Now, another question. Why did the passage state that Lara was the greatest batsman on earth? There were other batsmen who were also good, but why was he described as the greatest? Well, it stated that because he was the first cricketer to score 375 runs in Test cricket. So, there you have it. That's our passage. Now, I'm sure as you were reading, you were thinking of some questions too, and you were able to answer those questions that we stopped and asked, and then we looked for the answers. Now, let's look at some other questions based on the passage. Now, we already went through who is the famous cricketer in the story, and we would have learned that the famous cricketer in the story was Brian Charles Lara. Now, does the cricketer play international cricket? Now, that's a tricky question that you have to think about. Does the cricketer play international cricket? Whether your answer is yes or no, give reasons to support your answer. Now, the answer should be yes. This cricketer plays international cricket because he was playing in a match between West Indies and England at the Antigua Recreational Ground. Now we know that Brian Lara was from another country. He was playing on the West Indies team. He was playing against England and it was in Antigua. So you have a number of countries involved there, and therefore yes, it was international cricket. Now, how many test matches were played before this one? Can you remember which part of the passage would give you that? Now, the answer may not be direct. You may need to read and try to analyze something to sort that out. So let's see. The first line in the passage says, Monday, 18 May 1994 was the third day of the fifth cricket test match. Now, if it was the fifth cricket test match, now how many matches were played before? Of course, it had to be 4 because you'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, or the first match, the second match, third match, fourth, and then the fifth. So 4 matches were played before that one. In which country was the match played? Well, it was being played at the recreational ground in Antigua. So we know that answer there is Antigua. Now this one, state the cricketer's nationality. Now, what does nationality mean? Now, again, if we use our vocabulary, we know that nationality speaks about which country you were born and raised, which country you belong to. That's your nationality. Now, is there anywhere in the passage that says what was Brian Lara's nationality? Yes, it says Trinidadian. Brian Lara was a Trinidadian. Now, you live in Guyana, you were born and you grew up here. Now, what would be your nationality? If someone should ask you, what is your nationality? Would you say that you're a Trinidadian? Oh, absolutely not. You would say that you're a Guyanese. So your nationality would be Guyanese. But in the passage, the cricketer's nationality was Trinidadian. Now you must also remember that there was another cricketer. Who was that cricketer? Let's look a little at that cricketer. The next cricketer that played with Brian Lara was Shivnarine Chandrapal. Can you tell me what was his nationality based on the passage? Yes, it says Shivnarine Chandrapal is from Guyana, and so he is a Guyanese. Now, who was the holder of the record of the highest individual score? Remember, they spoke about Brian Lara surpassing someone because he was the holder of the then highest score. It was Sir Garfield Sobers. Sir Garfield Sobers was the previous holder of the record for the highest individual score. Now, can you say what time of day was the score broken? What time of day was the record broken? And give a reason. Well, the record was broken at 11:46 hours. This is because it is stated right there in the passage. It says, then it happened at 11:46 hours. So there, the time was given very clearly. Now, what do you think are accolades? Well, if you go back to the passage, it says that the people were showering accolades on the young cricketer. Remember, he had done something really outstanding. So accolades there would be praises. So accolades are praises. They were all shouting and congratulating him. Now, how many runs make up a triple century? Now, that's a question for you to think about. A triple century. So you need to go back to the passage a little, and you would realize that it said, when he was finally dismissed, he had scored 375 runs. At age 24, Lara was the greatest batsman on earth. He became the 12th batsman to score a triple century. So, how many runs exactly would make a triple century? Triple meaning 3. It means that 1 century would be 100. So a triple century would be 300 runs. Now, that's all for today, my grade 5 and 6ers. You can find this story in your Fun with Language Book 5. Now, let's recap a little on what we would have learned about reading vocabulary and how we would have applied it to our passage and answering those questions. Reading comprehension is the act of understanding what you are reading. Reading comprehension is also an intentional, active, and interactive process that occurs before, during, and even after you would have read a particular piece of writing, like we did. As we were reading, we were also making up questions, we were answering questions given. Reading comprehension is the last component of the act of reading. It means that it brings everything into one. It means that you are well-rounded in your reading knowledge. There are two elements that actually makes up the process of reading comprehension, and those are vocabulary knowledge and text comprehension. Now, in order for you to understand the text, you must be able to comprehend the vocabulary, simply meaning the words which were used in the piece of writing. Now, if the words that you are looking at don't make sense or you don't understand it, then it would be difficult for you to understand the story entirely. Now, you can draw on your prior knowledge of vocabulary, but you also need to continually be taught new words. It means that you need to keep expanding your vocabulary. That is why you're given passages every day to read, words to spell, questions to answer. Text comprehension, which is much more complex and varied than vocabulary knowledge, can be done through the use of text comprehension strategies such as monitoring for understanding, answering and generating questions, summarizing and becoming aware of and using a text structure to aid comprehension. And then to understand what you have read, we try to answer open-ended questions that mostly begins with what, where, who, why, and how. So there we would have had it. We have come to the end of another lesson. As always, I encourage you to read your stories, answer more questions like we would have done. We would have read our story, we would have answered our questions, we would have looked at a few specific words. So continue to follow us on the NGSA Booster. See you next time.